Israel. Okay, welcome to the class on the Kabbalah of the Baal Shem Tov. Just to recap a little bit about last week, I didn't finish with the story. I'd like to start off with the story this time. This week, by the way, this parsha is Bamidbar. We're starting the new book of Bamidbar. But last week, we spoke about Har Sinai, and we spoke about the emanation that comes from Har Sinai, the Mount Sinai. That at Mount Sinai, every day, there's a voice from heaven that goes out and says, woe to those people who insult the Torah. And the question that he asked was, if nobody's there to hear it, why say it? Right? Nobody's hearing it, but we obviously, the idea and the bottom line was the spiritual realm works in the realm of thoughts. And what it means is when there's a voice that goes out from Mount Sinai emanating, that means that every single person at a certain time of the day, it hits our thoughts. And what is it hitting our thoughts about? To return, to improve, to be better, to be greater, to express our potential. So anytime we get hit with a thought, so we should actually try to grasp that thought, hold on to it, and bring it out. And you make it to be that it'll actually is utilized, okay? You know, there was a great story. The Baal Shem Tov, he always wanted to help people to come back, and he always was involved in fixing people. There was this one great story where he's at his table, and he has his Hasidim around, and guests come in, and a rich man came in, you know, from a kind of a distant place. The Rabbi, who's the Shamish, like the main worker of the Baal Shem Tov. So, you know, he recognizes this guy. You know, you can tell by his mannerisms and his clothes that he's a wealthy person. Anyways, the Baal Shem Tov continues. He has his tish, songs, stories, divrei Torah, words of wisdom. And he befriends this other guy who's like one of these poor people. He was always known to always bring close all the simple folk and have a talk with him, discussion with him about old times. And during the course of the meal, you know, he's noticing that man, of course, that rich man who came in, who's basically hanging out in the back. Of course, the whole scene finishes, and the Baal Shem Tov retires to his study, and the rich man approaches the Rabbi, and he says, I want to meet the man. I want to see the Rav. He says, okay, I'll see if he'll grant you an audience. So he asked, and the Baal Shem Tov says, okay, you can come in. So he goes and sees the man, and the rich man comes in, and he has a bag full of gold coins, and he puts the gold coins on the table. And the Baal Shem Tov says, so what do you need? Tell me, what is it that you're seeking? And the man says, you know, thank God, Rabbi, I've got every single thing I need. Thank God I've got children that are already married off, and I've got parnasa, you know, and I've got health, and thank God, don't really need anything, you know. And he goes, you sure? Because nothing is by accident. So, you know, the reason why you're coming out here must be for some reason. He says, no, Rabbi, I heard about you and I felt like coming and I wanted to give you a donation. And he's about to leave, this rich man, and he says, and the Baal Shem Tov finally looks at him and says, are you sure there's really nothing that you need from me? And he says, no, Rabbi. He says, let me tell you a story. Come here, sit down. Let me tell you a story. He says, once upon a time, there were these two kids who grew up in the same town, same village. They were really so close with each other. They always had this unbelievable pact, always together, same school, same Rebbe, same upbringing. And they both came from wealthy houses. Just one second.
Can you hear him?
Yeah, I can hear him.
Okay. So they both came from wealthy houses. And they grew up together and they said, you know, we're going to be the best friends forever, right? Of course, what happens is one kid, they grow up, they get marriageable age, one guy marries out, and they place basically in a place that's far away. And the other guy, obviously, he also gets married, and they both have great businesses. But of course, one of the businesses falls of one of these buddies. Falls to the point where he's destitute. He's got so much debts, and there's no other thing he can do. He's just completely impoverished. He decides to go and make the trip to his friend. So he goes and he makes the trip to his friend. And his friend who's in this big, huge house. And he goes and he sits with the friends and the buddies get talking and they're so excited about seeing each other. He says, what's going on? So he says, you know, I lost all my money, every single thing. I'm completely impoverished. I have nothing to feed my family with. So the other friend says, of course, we're friends. We made this pact at a young age. He gets his accountant. He says, I want you to tally every single thing, all of my assets. What are all of my assets? So the ledger, the accountant says, this is what your assets. He says, split it. And he split it. And he gave him, his buddy, half of the assets. Amazing. And the guy took this unbelievable, great amount of wealth. He went back to his town, set up a business, and became extremely successful. And what happened is the guy who split up half his assets, he was good for a while, but then, of course, his money declined. He lost his businesses. He's destitute. And he goes back to his friend, hoping that the favor will be returned. His friend doesn't even let him in the house. He doesn't even let him in the house, okay?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Right? And the guy's like bewildered. He's like, what happened, man? The guy doesn't even let me in. He doesn't answer the door, right? And he knows I'm at the door. What's going on? He goes back, and he feels, terrible about it. He manages to pick up a business again. And once again, the other friend now loses his money, right? And he goes back to his friend who he took half the wealth from and didn't answer the door. And he says, I'm lost. I lost all my money. I lost all my wealth. Can you help me out? He says, yes, but this time it's going to be now you because you're going to have to mamish reciprocate a little bit in case, I need the favor. And the guy says, yeah. So they did it. He splits half his wealth, gives him the money. He goes back. Of course, he gets big. He gets rich again. And the other guy gets destitute. And the other guy finally goes back to his friend. And he hoping that the guy will return the favor. Nada. Clocks the door, closes the door, doesn't let his guards outside, don't let him in. The guy leaves. He goes. He's so poor. He's so broken. He's so starving. He doesn't even make it home, and he dies. His soul goes up to heaven, and heaven is just outraged. Okay, and they're going, no, this is not appropriate. And the Sutton, of course, then has permission, and he goes. He snatches the other guy's soul. The other guy dies too. Okay, so both these souls are sitting in the heavenly court, and they go, dude, how do we get to rectify this situation? We're sending you right to hell. That's basically what they said. Okay. This guy was gracious enough to give you twice, and you don't even answer the door. No. And then the other brother stood up for him in the heavenly court, and he goes, no. You got to give him a chance. Right? Let's go back down. And this time, and I'll accept to be poor. He'll be rich, so he'll have that opportunity to go ahead and give me when I come and ask for it. Okay? So they both go down, and they're both reincarnations. And this guy's poor, the guy who gave half his money twice. And this guy's rich, he's wealthy. And the guy's poor. He's going collecting, happens to be he's collecting in that town as he's an older person, knocking on the doors. And he says, what about that house over there? He's asking the people on the street, who's the guy in there? He says, oh, that guy never gives anybody, right? Because he'll give to me. He goes, he knocks on the door. The guy lets him in. He's sitting in his study. This is the Baal Shem Tov. Don't forget, he's telling this rich man this story. Okay? You got to remember where we started off. And so the poor man is in the study of this rich man, and he says, please, I'm begging you. You got to help me out. And the rich man says, no, I can't. I'm not. And the guy goes, please, a crust of bread, please. I'm begging you. I'm starving. And the guy says, no, absolutely not. And the guy dies on his study floor, right? In his living room floor, he dies. And the rich man says, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And when he calls the burial society, they have him take it away, and they have him buried. That's how the Baal Shem Tov ended the story, saying to this rich man. Okay? So the rich man, of course, what happens? The rich man's face was wide open, and he goes, oh my gosh, Rabbi, that's exactly what happened to me last week. Someone came in my house and asked me for something, and they died because I didn't give them. He says, oh my gosh, Rabbi, that's me? He says, yes, you're the soul. You were meant to come back down here. And you were meant to come back down here in order to give him, and now you blew it. You blew it twice. So the guy was unbelievable, feeling so distraught. And he says, what can I do? What can I do, Rabbi? Okay, you have to, mamish, split half your earnings and you have to support his family completely from now on. Of course, he accepted to do that. The point here, what I wanted to show you was how the tzaddikim, Kadosh Baruch Hu, they're always interested in us bettering ourselves, and they always give chances, okay? There's always a chance. There's always a way to fix, okay? So the Baal Shem Tov, he would do that, such extending. He didn't have to, but he wanted to. He's always extending himself to all the souls of Israel in order to rectify them and give them a pathway to fix, okay? Just to give you that from last week. We got to start Bamidbar. We got this really incredible mystic text here that we're going to share today, which is, I've read this over and over, and I tell you, I still don't have it. Okay. So we're going to learn it now today. Okay. So it speaks with the very beginning of the Parsha of Bamidbar, right? That's what the name of the Sefer is, and it's also the first words of the Parsha, Bamidbar Sinai. And Hashem spoke to Moshe in the Sinai desert, Bamidbar Sinai, in the tabernacle of meeting. Okay, so here now he's speaking now inside the tabernacle. So now they bring a midrash. The Baal Shem Tov brought this midrash, which is kind of an interesting text, and I'm going to leave a lot of it open for you guys to go ahead and reach back to me on what your thoughts are about this, because I don't think I have it. I have some thoughts, but I don't know if I have it. So it says here, until the tabernacle was erected. So God spoke to Moshe in the burning bush. So God spoke at the burning bush. Oh, that burning bush keeps on burning. Wonder what that bush was. And afterwards, God spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, right? When they were in Egypt, just before the 10th plague, Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron about Rosh Chodesh, and of course, there were the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, the Paschal offering. So God spoke to him in the land of Egypt. Okay. He also spoke to him in Midian, when actually after Moses comes back from the burning bush and he tells Yisro, I had this God experience, and God is calling me to go back and get the Jewish people out of Egypt. And then God spoke to him again in the land of Midian, says, you got to go. It's time. Okay. So God spoke to him in the burning bush. He spoke to him in Egypt. They spoke in Midian, the land of Midian. And he spoke to Moses, spoke to God at Mount Sinai. I'm sorry, God spoke to Moses at Mount Sinai. Okay. But once the tabernacle was erected, once the Mishkan, right, the dwelling place, the tent of meeting was erected. So then he said, modesty is the best. Yafeh atzniut. Okay? Modesty is the best. Right? Because it says, B'tzneah lehaleches im Hashem elokecha. With modesty, you will go with God. Okay? So the question here is, okay, what's the real point of this midrash, if you want to think about it for a second? God spoke at the burning bush in Midian and Egypt and Sinai, but then when you're inside, that God would speak to Moshe, that's the best, because it's sneeze, because it's like inside. Okay? So the question is, there's outside speaking, and then there's inside speaking. And obviously, the idea of God speaking inside in the tent of meeting was called sniut, and that's the best. Okay? So I mean, just to get in terms of the thought of that, what does that mean, and what is our take home to learn that midrash in terms of our relationship with God? And that's where we're going to go to. He's going to go to the first halacha of the Shulchan Aruch. The very first siman of the Shulchan Aruch, right, speaks about, of course, how you get up in the morning. It's amazing, because the first halacha of our code of Jewish law is Hiskaber ka'ari la'amod baboker la'avod das boro, which means you have to get up like a lion in the morning to serve the King of Kings, to serve the Creator. Okay? So a person has to get up like a lion. Have you guys ever seen how a lion gets up? Most of the time I go to the zoo, he's sleeping. Okay? How they get up? There's something very deep in there, but that's what we're going to get into. But then there's, the Shulchan Aruch is kind of like written by two authors, I have to say, the Code of Jewish Law. And it really happens because there is the Sephardic Rabbi Yosef Kaira. He wrote a Shulchan Aruch. And at the exact same time in Europe, in Krakow, Rabbi Moshe Isserles wrote also a code of Jewish law, because it was very hard to extract laws from the Talmud. So therefore, they needed to want to set just a plain set of laws that can be clear for everybody what to do, because to extract it from the Talmud takes a lot of energy. And the people, of course, were getting weaker since we were getting farther away from Mount Sinai. So anyway, so there's two authors who basically codified the Jewish laws. And what happened was Moshe Isserles found out that Rabbi Yosef Kairo wrote the laws. So he says, well, I'm not going to come out with my book. So because then there'll be two codes of Jewish laws, and it'll be like two Torahs. And it won't unify Israel. It'll separate the people of Israel. So what he do is he decided, no, I'm not going to write my laws. I'm going to rather put notes to his book. So Rabbi Moshe Isserles lowered himself, didn't publish his work after who knows how many years he was writing it, right? And he decided, no, I'm just going to make notes to him, to Rabbi Yosef Kairo. So he's called the Haggah, or the Ramah for short, Rabbi Moshe Isserles. Actually, I happen to be a descendant of his. My grandmother's name, her maiden name was Isserles. We come from him, okay? I believe that it was him praying for me to pluck me out of Los Angeles and bring me to a yeshiva, okay? On his merits, on his prayers. Because a lot of his descendants who are remained in Europe are baptized, and the ones who are in America are quite secular, okay? So in any case, Rabbi Moshe Isserles wrote on that note there that he says, I'm just going to, he speaks about, first of all, the big law, which we kind of touched on last week, Shaviti Hashem lenegdi tamid. A very huge principle in the Torah comes from a verse in Tehillim, where King David says, I have placed God before me always. Actually, if you'll see in the synagogues where the prayer leader stands, there's usually what's called a Shaviti, which basically you'll have symbols, Kabbalistic symbols, maybe a menorah in the form of letters. That's Psalm 67. Maybe you'll just have Yud K Vav K, and that's called a Shaviti for short. It's a meditative device, like a kamea, or they used it for another term for it. Doesn't come to my mind now. But of course, it was one of those meditative devices that you would stare at the name of God. But simply put, Shiviti Hashem lenegdi tamid, I will place God before me always. Of course, the Hasidic masters go very big, and it fits with what we said maybe 2 weeks ago, that negdi means God is facing me always. Okay? In other words, wherever I go, God is facing me. But the Ramah, Rabbi Moshe Isserles, goes into just an attitude of how a person has to behave, that usually we all know, quite simply, that the way we behave with our family members is not how we'll behave when we're in front of nobility, if we would be in front of nobility. Okay? If you're going to a party where there's big wigs at the party, let's say, right? Whatever you'll call a big wig, okay? Most people will associate with a lot of money or fame. Let's say you're going to a party with that. You're not going to behave the same way that you'd behave inside your house. So all the more so when if you would to imagine in your mind that God is always there, how you will behave in a different way. So a person has to, of course, integrate that God is always there. And even if I'm in my house, I'm in the closed recesses in my private quarters, I'm not going to behave in a certain way. Okay. Then he goes something interesting. He says this amazing line here. So he says, a person should not be embarrassed before people who will mock him when he does the service of God. When he performs any mitzvah, that a person should not be embarrassed from people who will mock him. Okay? It's a huge idea. Because, of course, what happens is a lot of people will not do a mitzvah, or they'll try to do a mitzvah and, let's say, like a bracha, a blessing. You're going to drink something And some people, they'll say the bracha quietly. They won't say the blessing out loud, right? They don't want to disturb the people. Or definitely they don't want people to go, come here, religious guy. Ah, you're Mr. Religious. Ah, you're Mr. Righteous now. You're so righteous, right? So, of course, he's saying you must not be embarrassed from anybody. Now, the interesting thing is they didn't laugh at you yet, but you were afraid that they might laugh at you. If you were to do a mitzvah in public, they might laugh at you. They might mock you. They'll put you down. They'll speak about you. When you leave, they'll go, Mr. Religious all of a sudden, right? And then the next line is really kind of also very interesting. Gam b'hatznea leches. Also, you have to go modestly. Okay? And when you're lying in your bed, you have to understand or think or contemplate before who you are lying in bed. Imagine if the King of Kings was right there standing on the bed, right there. But it says this line, which is quite puzzling. And people always want to try to find what's the connection to this line. Okay? So I'm just going to read a little bit from the Mishnah Berurah, Rabbi Yisrael Kagan, who was called the Chavetz Chaim. Okay, Yisrael Meir Kagan. And he just to give you a little bit of embellishment into this law of not to be embarrassed to do a mitzvah before people who might mock you or will mock you. Okay? Let's say a person is a regular person, right? And you're among rabbis and you're going to shake the lulav. And they're all looking at you. Okay? A person should not be embarrassed from them. He should learn how to do the mitzvah. Okay? In other words, humility. But if it's possible for him to do the mitzvah without being in front of them, that's even better. That's an interesting line. Okay? In other words, you don't want to be a show-off. However, in front of other people, comrades, equals, okay, that can learn from you, and you know a little bit more than them, there is to say that it's better to do in front of them specifically, okay, that they could learn from him to do like what he does. However, you have to make sure what's your intention. Your intention has to be completely for the sake of heaven, completely for the sake of the mitzvah, okay? Not because so people will praise you, okay? Not so people will laud you for any way, or not that even if God forbid you should have a thought of saying, oh, I did really good, okay? You have to have intention for the sake of heaven and not, God forbid, to get glorified through it, okay? And then, okay, so that's in terms of not to be embarrassed with people in front, to do mitzvahs in front of people, you know? I had a true thing that with me, when I was in Houston, I had a sciatica. It was real bad. And I was lying there and I took, Motrin, and I know these things could last a long time, the sciatica running down my legs. And I said, God, please, I really need help with this. And I'll give me something to do with my legs that I could, glorify you in a certain way and take away this pain, the sciatica. So I took upon myself. Hashem still helps me to this day when I remember to do it, to always, before again, going to a synagogue, to run to the synagogue door. It's a mitzvah actually to run, not only just to jog, not a little sprint. The Gemara actually says to run like you're being chased by a lion. Okay? Imagine to run to the synagogue door. Let's say you're 20, 40, 50 feet away from it. Like sometimes I'm 100 feet and I sprint to the door wildly. Now, a lot of people are watching me do this. You understand? Because everybody else is gathering in the synagogue for Mincha, Mariv, or Shachrit, or whatever. Am I worried about what they're thinking? Absolutely not. Okay? I'm already thank God in that area. I was able to go ahead and not care in the least. Okay? Because I know this is what I need to do. And I didn't go to explain to everybody why I'm doing it. the deal that I made with God, the acceptance upon myself to run to a synagogue, that Hashem should, and I got, and thank God to this day, thank Kenaina Hara, without the evil eye, God has, thank God. And that's been quite a while. So what does it mean then, the next line, Gam batsnei lechet, that you should also go modestly? Because here, there's a thing about, you want to do a mitzvah in public, and yet there's a huge inyan, there's a huge topic to do a mitzvah modestly. No one should know your tzedakah, your charity. No one should know the great deeds that you do. That's the huge, big story about the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, he was a hidden tzaddik for many years. And Achia, his spirit guide, who was his teacher, Achia Hashiloni, who was a prophet from the time of King Solomon, his soul would come and teach him all of the teachings of the Kabbalah and the mysticism, and definitely Sefer Yetzirah. And after 10 years of learning with him, he's 36. I think he appeared to him at 26. And 36, he says, it's time you have to be revealed. You have to be revealed in the world. And that would bother the Baal Shem Tov greatly, because he wanted to remain humble. He wanted to be the hidden tzaddik. You go around, you help people, right? Because once you become known, there's problems, right? Everybody would say that. Once you become a famous guy, right, there's problems. There's all kinds of problems. Biggest problem would be, let's say, you could get to your head, God forbid. Another problem is you're swamped with people and you can't really, lots of people, they become Baal Mofis. Baal Mofis means they become a miracle worker, and they're swamped every day. I used to go, when I was first in yeshiva, I would go and Rebbe hunting. I would call it Rebbe hunting. Now I call it Rebbe hunting, okay? Go hunt me some rabbis. Hunt them means go find them and get a blessing from them. That's the hunting. You find about this Kabbalist here and this mystic here, and let's go. And you take a bunch of guys and you go out of the yeshiva, and you find him where he lives, and you go and you get the blessing or get the tikkun or whatever it is, right? And these people, they have waiting lines all day, and they're helping people all day, and it's a great thing. But then if they would not to be known, maybe they could do more. Anyways, there's all kinds of, we call cheshbonos, or accounting thoughts, that why, right, a person would want to do mitzvahs b'tznius. There was a great story. This couple, man and woman, used to always secretly put, give tzedakah to people, and they would always, they were very particular about their identity could not be known, right? It was like Batman and Batman-esque, okay? Nobody could know their identity. But one time they got it, they gave, and they got caught, and the guy was chasing after them, and they had to run this way, that way, and the guy was really in hot pursuit of them, and they didn't want their identities to be known. And the only place where they could go was this big oven, okay? And they ran into the oven, and they're hiding in the oven. And now, I don't know if the oven was blazing hot, but it was hot, because the guy, the man, he's hopping on his feet going, dang, it's hot, right? And he's looking at his wife, who's not hot. His wife's just chilling. She's chilling in the oven. And he's hopping like this on his legs, going, wah, 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 right? And he says to her, why are you just chilling? Why isn't your feet burning? And she says, well, when you give the tzedakah, my loving husband, how do you do it? He says, I give money. And she says, I give food. It's ready-made. So because of the merit of that food as ready-made for poor people, therefore, I don't burn. My feet don't burn. So she offers him to stand on her feet, so he would be able to, until the person would, fade away, would not find them and give up the hunt. So it's an important thing to be modest and to do things modestly and not to show. So there was this great thing that Achia finally told the Baal Shem Tov at he's 36. He says, you got to reveal yourself. And he didn't want to. He says, what have I lost? I must have lost some schus that I can't be hidden anymore. right? And so Achia, the only way to get him to reveal himself was to tell him who he was in a previous generation, in a previous incarnation. So he said many years ago, this is what Achia told the Baal Shem. In the year 1573, there lived in the holy city of Tzfat, right, a simple Jew who knew only how to pray, not to study any Torah, but he was pure in his deeds and modest and hidden in his ways. One night, after completing the midnight prayer, the special midnight prayer, he heard a knock on the door. And who's knocking on my door after midnight? He goes, who's there? Right? And he heard a heavenly voice answer. It's Elijah the prophet. May he be blessed. May he be remembered for good. Zachor latov. He opened the door and Elijah the prophet entered his room, which became filled with light and joy. I have come to reveal to you the year of the coming of the Messiah, said Elijah. But there is a condition, that you tell me what you did on the day of your bar mitzvah that led the heavenly court to rule that you merited that I appear to you and to reveal you divine secrets. What I did then, what does the guy answer? What did this guy answer? He says, so that it was like, it was a judgment. It was some kind of huge thing that went on in court, in heaven. That the court was going, this guy did something in bar mitzvah that is so unbelievable that it's making huge tumult. And we have to test him because he's worthy of getting this unbelievable divine information. And the Satan says, let me go test him, man. I'm going to take care of this guy. And Elijah says, no, let me test him. So Elijah came down to test him, to see if he would divulge the secret, this unbelievable mitzvah that he did on his bar mitzvah. So what did the guy answer, Elijah? He says, what I did then, I did only for God's glory. How can I reveal it to others? If for this reason you can't tell me what you were sent to reveal, so be it. Fine. It's not necessary. I don't need it. Because I have a tradition that what a Jew does for God should be hidden from the eyes of humans. It should be just for the Holy One, blessed be he alone. So Elijah, of blessed memory, disappeared and he ascended to heaven, where there was a great commotion, like I said. They were impressed by this man's sincere piety, that he rebuffed Elijah the prophet. You just turned down Elijah the prophet, boy. Right? That he was going to tell you when Mashiach was going to come, right? No, this guy didn't do it. He wanted to act only for heaven's sake alone. The heavenly court considered the matter and ruled that Elijah prophet should appear to the tzaddik again in Tzfat. He should teach him Torah and reveal to him secrets. This simple Jew became unique in his generation, a pure tzaddik, hidden in his pious modesty, so that no one knew of his greatness and his holiness. The day came when he was elderly and he passed away to the next world. After discussion and argument, the heavenly court decided that his reward should be to descend again to this world, and heaven would this time force him to reveal himself. And through him, a new path would be revealed to establish and revive the world with a spirit of purity and a spirit of holiness. And a new light would shine in each and every heart, and through him, God's name would be sanctified and the earth filled with divine knowledge that would hasten the end, right? And therefore, that's when Achia Hashiloni told the Baal Shem Tov, that soul is you and you must do it. So that's when the Baal Shem Tov finally accepted to go out, okay? Just the idea here is we see this dichotomy. Let's go back into the text. Rabbi Ramosha Isserlis, he writes, a person should not be ashamed if other people mock him in his service of God. And then right away it says he should act modestly, which seems to be, I don't know how these two ideas fit together. To act modestly is great, but yet here he's talking about the first part of the phrase, you're out in the open, baby, hang it out there, man. You know what we call that? Rabbi Nachman came up with it. It's called holy chutzpah, okay? Holy chutzpah. That means you should do the mitzvahs out there. You should not be afraid of people And actually, it should be teaching them or making an impression on them. But the Mishnah Brura does go on to say, don't do it with a point where there's got to be a fight. Okay? Don't fight. We're not supposed to fight. Okay? Yes, you could. I mean, you have to hold your ground, laddie. But don't make fights. Okay? Sometimes you got to know when to pull back, and we're just going to let it go. Okay? But the interesting thing is, the question is, what do these two statements have to do with each other? Why did Moshe Isserles put them back to back? So what does it mean? Right? So he says that is, when should he not be ashamed of others? When he acts modestly. That's interesting. For the main thing is that one's Torah study and service of God be done in truth and faith. One's words and heart should be together, be he among others or alone. In other words, the idea here is, we call it equanimity to a certain degree, but really what it is that how you behave inside and how you behave outside. And a person always has to check himself. When you're behaving outside, how are you behaving? Are you making sure you're proper? For what motivation? Are you making sure that you're doing what's proper? Okay? So, but I see a deeper thing that they didn't really translate quite well in the translation that you have. Okay? So he says here that what can help you? The biggest thing is, and it is a challenge today. I know in a place, I was in a community once where I had no headway in terms of getting people even to kosher their kitchen, even though they would eat out in their house. I could not even get them to make their kitchens kosher. I couldn't. And the reason why is because of, we'll call it, the way I put it is social status. That everybody got so along so well together that if it were to get out that this one person who was a devout student of mine were to kosher his kitchen at home, then the other people would ostracize him or mock him, put him down. He would be outside of the social circle. So it was a tremendous fear that nobody was willing to take the step to be so brazen to go ahead and act like that and to do some kind of mitzvah, to advance in terms of their spiritual growth in any way, because they were afraid that their peers were going to look down on them and mock them because, all of a sudden you're becoming Mr. Religious now, okay? But what we have to develop, I wish I had my shofar, I blow my shofar. The shofar is called Holy Chutzpah. I used to have this. It was one amazing old man in my early days in yeshiva, and I was on a bus. You're on a bus. You're talking about in the middle of August, July. It didn't matter when. And this old man, he hung out in the kotel, and everybody knew this crazy guy. Crazy. You have a bag man, a bag lady. There's bag ladies. There's bag man. He was a bag man. And he got on the bus, and I'm sitting on the bus, and he picked this guy up, and I go, here's my favorite yid. Right? And the bus driver is haggling with him. Where's the money? Give me the money. Gives the money. And out of the middle of nowhere, the guy pulls out of his bag a shofar, and he's just in the bus. And it's not Rosh Hashanah. Right? So, holy chutzpah. Holy chutzpah. Okay? How do we develop holy chutzpah? So here he says, and the key here that the Baal Shem Tov is giving us, okay? It says, in other words, the way that I'm understanding this text is, how you want to do the right thing in public, and you want to do it for the right reasons. You don't want to do it so people will look at you and admire you, God forbid. But you want to be able to be out there and be strong and to make your line and to make your point and to express your potential, that you're not hindered by what other people think of you. And the key to do that is b'tznius lechet. In other words, by doing it inside, in sinna, when you're inside your own private chambers and you're dedicated and you're devoted, that helps you when you do it like that. that actually gives you a special help that when you are out there, you're also able to do it. Okay. And you won't be afraid of people. The fear won't exist. When you're able to do it inside in the privacy of your own home, that will somehow enables you to be able to do it also outside. Now, the question here on the floor is, okay, you know, I had an amazing Shabbos. I went into the Carlbach Minyan. I don't know if you guys got a Carlbach Minyan in your area. Actually, there is one that's pretty close to it. It's called Hamish. And they are really rocking. They really rock. And I was at a shul, very synagogue, where they sing a lot. And I reached an unbelievable awareness in the middle of the chanting. And they get incredible chanting, okay? That I pictured, and I say this to myself a lot, okay? If people say, how's it going? People ask you, okay, of course, you always got to answer Baruch Hashem. Thank you. Thank Hashem, right? But you can also answer this on top. I'm living the dream. Can you say that? Imagine yourself saying that with absolute sincerity and absolute love and absolute fulfillment. I'm living the dream. And not only that, listen to this, and everything that we've been learning for these past years in the Sulam and all of those Torahs, you have to picture and imagine. And that's where I was in a space on Shabbos where I was imagining the entire world were waking up with the statement going, I am living the dream. Can you imagine? Just put yourself in that place, though, even if it's just for a moment, even if it's just a hair, okay? To imagine you're living the dream and the whole world's living the dream. Now, what is living the dream? For me, living the dream means everybody has the most sincere relationship with their creator. Can you imagine now and picture it in a certain sense in the spiritual realm where there is no time and there is no space, because in the spiritual realm it is existing, that everybody's, in a certain sense, all the souls of the entire world are already connected to God in a sincere way. And everybody already, in a certain sense, in that place of their inner soul, are already living the dream. So can you imagine now saying, I'm living the dream. I have a total, sincere relationship with God, which is the most important thing ever, okay? And that's what he means by that your Torah and your service should be emet. Emet means truth, and I retranslate that as sincere. I am sincere, okay? Because when I like the word sincere, it works for me, okay? Ve'emunah, and totally trustworthy, faithful, okay? So you're totally faithful, right? Piv v'libo shavim, his mouth and his heart are equal. That means what? Oh, between the head to the heart, sometimes it takes a lifetime to build that bridge. And to imagine now, put yourself in the place as if they are already equal. That your mind, you know, there's so much to talk about in this because, you know, I was talking about, you know, the Torah, it's a premise that the Torah demands state management for you to manage your state. And we talked about this before, that the head should dictate what the heart feels. And the heart should feel what the head tells it to do. And the head usually has a good idea of how we should be feeling at any time. Now, men are different. If you ask a man, I'm telling you, you ask me any given time of the day, hey, Rabbi Cohen, how you feeling? And I would like, do you have a chart that I could look at, maybe a list that I could point out maybe, right? But the reality is really, in our inner sense, we're always in a state of joy. Joy is always there. We should always be able to access that and know it's there. Anytime we ask you, how you feeling? Joyous, Baruch Hashem. Okay? Thank you, Hashem. Okay? Because why? How do I know this? We've said this before. Is because when the month of Adar comes, that's the month that Purim is in, the law is you have to increase joy. And when the month of Av comes in, that's the month that Tisha B'Av is, the destruction of the temples. it says, Mama'atim b'simcha, you have to decrease joy. Here in this month, increase. And here in this month, decrease. Wait a minute. If I'm decreasing, it must be, I have it already. If I'm increase, it must be, I have it already. So the constant is always there's a sense of joy that is naturally there. We have to access it at all times. Okay. So piv alibo shavim, that the head always has to dictate to the heart in terms of what it feels. Okay. Now, of course, you're right. Things are going to come up, and we're always got to filter, and we always got to process all the garbage that happens that's thrown at us. And that's good stuff. But behind everything, there is always going to be joy. Okay? Because when you do the right thing, there's no greater joy than that. Bein shehu im bnei adam, whether he is with people or whether he is alone in his private chambers. The question really is, and I don't have an answer for this, okay? That we started off with the Midrash. The Midrash said, what? God spoke to Moses in the burning bush, and God spoke to Moses in Sinai and in Egypt and in this place, and he spoke to him even in El Segundo. Right? And Cucamonga, yeah, he spoke to him in Cucamonga too. But when the tabernacle was built, and Moshe was being with Hashem and speaking, and Hashem was speaking to Moshe inside the tabernacle. Oh, tznius is the best, right? That was with the words, right? Modesty is the best, okay? So given what we just now covered, why is modesty the best, okay? Why, after all of this idea, what is the Midrash conveying? What is it? Its message telling us. So just from what we are discussing now, and you could please chime in, I'd be happy. We're going to end off in just a few minutes. That when Moshe, it's kind of bizarre when you think about it, when Moshe was able to talk to God in the most modest of places, obviously this turned things around in a really dynamic way. What way was it? That somehow, that in the terms of the world and the outside world, you have the inside world, Moses communicating with God in the innermost private chambers, right? The Midrash did go on to say, right? Kol kavod bas melech penima, all of the glory of the kings is the daughter who is in the innermost chamber. So that being in the chamber, that being of intimacy, that being able to remain sincere and having integrity in the private chambers of your house enables more of God to get out there. Okay? That's what I think the Midrash is saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you can disagree. What I'm saying is once that tabernacle is built and there's this place where you can have this internal connection with God, so then that enables a person actually to be able to express greater potential out in the world. So the idea here is, the rule is that what you can do and practice inside your house with integrity, with sincerity, enables you to actually expand and express your potential more in the world. As just like the tabernacle, when the place in the tent of meeting was set up, that enabled actually more of God to be in the world, which is kind of a bizarre thing. I remember having a conversation with Rabbi Yaakov about the sets of tablets. And as we know, the tablets, the first tablets Moses broke. Those are the 2 tiers that fell into the Great Sea, by the way, as the Zohar describes it. So when they were broken, of course, when he came down, let's say there was no Chet HaEgel, and he came down and the tablets were there. There was no place to put them. What was the idea? Where were those tablets going to be? Were they going to have to make a box for them afterwards? Right? An Ark of the Covenant afterwards? Meanwhile, where are they going to hang? So I think we both there's kind of a hint there that if those tablets were not going to be broken, for sure the world would have been totally different, because we were like malachim, we were like angels in Mount Sinai. So the tablets would have been amamish and so up in the open, right? Actually, it could have created ayin hara, I think, in a sort. Or no, there wouldn't be any ayin hara. It would have been some kind of different situation. But once they're broken, Now we have a different situation, and the tablets need to be put in the Ark of the Covenant, and they had to be tznius. So somehow the tikkun, the rectification of tznius, of being modest, right, for some reason is a rectification for being able to do the right thing out there and not be afraid of people, no matter what, okay? Now, the rest of the Torah was an interesting thing, okay? But we won't go into that right now, okay? But in any case, we should understand the idea of the principle of sincerity and the principle of being intimate with God. God really desires a true intimate relationship, and we actually have access to that all the time. We have access to joy all the time, and we have access to being in that sincere relationship all the time. And the sincere relationship, part of that sincere relationship means you want everybody else to be in that sincere relationship. It's just not the same if it's not. And only when we're in that can we enable then the outside and us to be able to behave outwardly, okay? Without fear of people. We're not worried about what people think of us because we're always going to do the right thing outwardly. All right, we'll stop here. Does anybody have any questions?